Wherever there's a common pain, you can find common purpose.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
In light of the recent death of George Floyd and events and scenario in our country, I, like many of you, have been listening, learning, reflecting, and asking myself, what can I do? How can I help? What does action look like for me? And that's when I really started to look at my behaviors, my assumptions, and also look at the use of my platform. One of the things on the list, a literal written list that I have of the things I can do, and by the way, social media is one of them. You know, that's one area. But there are a lot of other things. And one of the things is to start having more conversations, one-on-one, within smaller groups, in the real world. And so that's where I started. I got together a group of women. It's the Renegade community. And we had an honest conversation, an open conversation where people could ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions and learn and listen and share. And as a result, we also decided it'd be a great opportunity to share a discussion more outwardly, more forward-facing. So today I have Nisha Anand and Dokun on the show with me. Nisha is the CEO of DreamCorps, and she has her master's degree in international peace and conflict resolution. I connected with Nisha after Van Jones was on the Why Not Now podcast, which I highly recommend you follow him and listen to him. You can go back and listen to that conversation if you'd like. But Nisha was his chief of staff for many years, and so that's how we originally connected. Dokun is a life plan guide, a certified life plan guide and relationship expert. She's trained in marriage and family therapy. And both Nisha and Chanel are a part of the Renegade community. I learned so much from this conversation, and I hope that you do too. I hope that you are able to take away as much as I was from this conversation. And this is just a reminder at how we can really elevate bridges by talking, by having conversations that are rooted in kindness, but also intention to make change and to take action. Because if there's one common ground, I think it's pretty safe to say that we all believe that change needs to happen.
How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. For me, being able to design my own day is a non-negotiable. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a time management nerd. So when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and more effective, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and I'm a bit obsessed. It's Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized, and I have a new sense of perceived control. My to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. With Monday.com, it's like I have a brand new operating system. There's no long list, and everything has its own home, its own deadline, its own team member that's assigned and associated, and it's color coordinated. We all have multifaceted jobs and businesses. There are many components to my business, and each and every one of them has its own compartment. Each division is always one click away. For example, my team and I have a dedicated board for this very podcast. Did you know there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast to air? It's the same exact process every time. And it's a system. We have the various key steps mapped out as micro tasks. And this allows for my team and I to stay in lockstep every step of the way. With Monday.com, I can zoom out and see the big picture, a roadmap view from 30,000 feet. And a moment later, I can zoom in and focus on a specific micro task within a project, within a division of the company. I could go on and on about the features that Monday.com offers, one of which is I've built my social media content calendar inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, that I like, and it's embedded into my overall Google Calendar. Another feature that I love is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to Monday.com if you want a free trial. And let me know on social media how it goes for you. Shoot me a DM. We can swap tips and tricks. All right, everyone, I've got an announcement. As of today, we are officially enrolling for the 2021 Renegade Accelerator Program, formerly called the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. Okay, so who is this program for? What is it? The Renegade Accelerator is for driven female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs ready to massively increase their impact and income. The program is for like-minded, like-hearted women all over the globe. The experience is intimate, live, real-time, virtual, and it's led by me. Our curriculum is equal parts education, practical education, collaboration, and accountability. In the accelerator, you'll learn directly from me, and I share everything I've learned over the past 20 years in business. We meet in real time to learn, discuss, and grow together. This is high touch. I'll teach you a variety of things, from personal branding to the business side of public speaking, podcasting, publishing, marketing partnerships, how to productize your intellectual property, and we even talk about investing. I teach you all about the different types of investing in order to build your personal wealth. You will also learn the renegade mentality, which is a key ingredient in your success to generate real results. This program is the career love of my life because I get to curate a mosaic of driven, like-minded, like-hearted women who come together to lift each other and themselves up to the next level. After the Renegade Accelerator, you become a member of my top-level alumni community. This group of unmatched women who are making a positive impact is personally curated by me. The relationship building and networking opportunities are endless, and this collective of real, valuable connections will be something that you have forever. If you're at the point where you are ready to take action and accelerate, head to renegadeaccelerator.com. You can sign up for more information where I will guide you in determining if the program and the timing is right for you. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Why not now? head to renegadeaccelerator.com.
Chanel and Nisha, thank you so much for joining me today. In the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop right in as we usually do. Let's start with you, Chanel. Can you think about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? I'd love to dissect that day, minute, hour, season and kind of look under the hood of how you navigated from idea to action.
Yeah, I'll say that moment came just recently. My why not now was really kind of boldly posting something online that was really vulnerable and put me in the forefront in a very sensitive topic that I've tried to sometimes avoid, certainly not talk about in a way that's personal or as transparent as what I'm going through. So that would be my moment. I posted a video online talking about how I felt really frustrated and tired and overwhelmed by the state of our world, and looking at kind of the racial discontent, looking at the protests and riots and things that were happening, and just feeling very weary about where we were headed as a nation. And I felt like everything I was seeing online was so toxic and so hopeless. And I was really tired of living in that space. And I didn't hear anyone saying something that felt like what I felt at my core. And so I wanted to kind of put out a different kind of energy into the conversation. And it actually happened in the midst of me doing, I call it my reclaim the morning time. I sit and I write every morning and just do stream of consciousness writing. And during that time, I kind of got this moment from God, or download, or whatever you want to call it, where I just felt this real sense of clarity of God saying to me, Chanel, I've put you here for such a time as this, and that you don't need to be hopeless. What you need to do is live out your purpose and go back to the core of who you are and use your talents and apply everything you have to actually be a light in this moment. And what was interesting about that is that I typically have like those kinds of insights and then I deal with it later. And this time I didn't. I sat down right where I was in my bathrobe in front of the window, 7 a.m, and I just recorded the video, no makeup, hair thrown in a bun, and just posted it on Instagram. And the response was insane.
It was, obviously we know each other and we've all been inundated with a lot of information and a lot of emotion recently. And your video, it did exactly what you said in that it didn't feel toxic. It didn't feel hopeless, but you admitted that you had in moments prior. It was not about this cancel culture that I know you feel strongly about, and the mean kind of anger is one thing, but then that cancel culture is just the opposite of what we're trying to do here. So I know I was really struck when I watched it, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that's your why not now moment, because I think that it really meets people where they are right now. And so we'll dive in, and I'd love to talk through it more. And I love that you're in your bathrobe, by the way. And it just, you could tell it was in the moment. There was nothing preconceived. And so thank you for sharing that. One of the other things you mentioned in that video, though, was we all have talents and gifts that we can apply to this, and kind of empowering to use those, right? And it just really, I think, gives people a new frame to think through what they might be able to do in terms of action, incremental of some of the obvious things. So let's pause there. I'd love to hear your why not now story, Nisha. And I know there will be a bridge here between the two, and look forward to the discussion. But Nisha, tell me about a why not now moment of yours.
The thing that came up when you asked that was at the beginning of 2019, when I was approached and asked if I would consider being the CEO at Dream Corps. And Dream Corps is the national social justice nonprofit I run. So skip ahead. Yes, I said yes. But I have to say, the first time I was asked, I said no immediately. Because I know that when you're the leader, when you're the person in front, it is hard. You get all of the critique and none of the glory, right? Like all the celebration, you celebrate your team. Everything that goes bad, it's all your fault. And who wants that? That's hard. But, one thing that struck me was to lead means to go first. That's what it means to be a leader. That always struck me. But the second thing that was holding me back was I was really comfortable at the job that I was in. It was a hard job. It was a challenging job. I had been the chief of staff for Van Jones for the last 7 years ahead of that, working at Dreamcore. And I was good at it. It's really good being behind the scenes and executing someone else's vision. And it actually worked for me around this idea of allyship. I was very in front as a young person. I was an international human rights activist. I was speaking around the world. Coming back to be behind the scenes, I thought was a really important thing I could do as an ally. And I know that's probably a word we'll talk about quite a bit in this talk, but comfort is a really dangerous place to be. Being comfortable means you are not moving ahead. And I sat with that for a second. The thing that I remember, and this is another one of those moments, was early on when I was working for Van, I had made a big mistake, as I usually do. We were fighting about why I did something that I probably shouldn't have done. And I remember saying, I have 15 years of fundraising experience. I know what I'm talking about. And he said, and back then I didn't like this, but he said, no, Nisha, you have 1 year of fundraising experience that you did 15 years in a row. And I remembered that conversation when I was being asked to be the CEO. And I thought, wait, being comfortable is exactly the wrong thing. And Van also said to me after that, it's 1 year, which sounded harsh. He also said, if you work with me, we will never do the same thing year after year. I'm always growing, which means you're always growing. And that's why I stayed. That's why I stayed for so long. And it's why that why not now moment came to me. They want me to do this. I have to grow. I can't stay in comfort. Why not now? And so here I am today. That's the story.
And both of you, your why not nows were rooted in getting uncomfortable. And that's growth, right? That's what that's truly what it's all about, and why I created this podcast was to discuss these moments of getting uncomfortable and taking that step anyway. So, and I love what you said, Nisha, about kind of Van calling you out and saying, no, you have 1 year of doing the same thing over and over for 15 times 15, and check ourselves. It's like, wait, I'm going through thinking, oh my gosh, yes, I'm there. I have that relatable feeling in certain areas. Let's talk a little bit about our current climate. And given that, and just kind of for the listener, just so you know, earlier today we had a conversation with a smaller group, and it was intimate and very real and raw with some of the people in our community of renegades. And we kind of opened it up and said, okay, anybody can ask anything, right? We want to make this a place where we can ask the dumb question. We can not be ashamed for it, but learn from it, right? And Nisha, one of the things you said, kind of going back to, I guess, a Van Jones-ism, is hope that it's your fault. Because if it is, that means you can change it. Can you talk a little bit about that for a second?
Yeah. It could have been the same mistake or a different mistake, because I don't know, we all have those same mistakes, but I tell it to my staff. In fact, I even told them this today, is when something goes wrong, even if 99% of the problem is someone else's fault and 1% of it is your fault, that 1% is yours to own. Completely own it. I don't have to point fingers at the other 99%. Being authentically myself is owning that 1%. But what's even better than authentically owning that 1% is when the whole damn thing's your fault, because then you can change it. That's what you have the power to do. If it is something you did wrong, you have the power to fix it. And that's really liberating. A lot of times that can be debilitating. You don't want to look bad in front of people. You don't want to admit that you've messed up. But admitting you messed up, the next step is admitting you're going to fix it. And that can be a really beautiful thing. And I try to carry that with me and give it to everyone else all the time too.
It's amazing to think about your wrongdoing being such an asset, because you have that power to change. And it makes me think about expertise and leadership, and how I personally feel like we have a leadership void in many areas right now. And the truth is we all are leaders if we choose to be. And Chanel, you started our conversation earlier today with the fact that you said, I'm not an expert. And I could physically kind of feel and see everybody just like, okay, if she's not an expert, then it just was this way of instantly building a bridge and also showing that you're leading and you don't have to be an expert to lead. And so can you share a little bit about what kind of went through your mind when you said that, and how you show up, whether it's online or in person, and having discussions with humility, but also with willingness to share and get uncomfortable?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I think that vulnerability is the starting point of leadership because it's the starting point of connection. And we can't lead people if we're not really connected with them, if they don't sense some level of buy-in with us. So I think when we step out of ourselves, when we get a little uncomfortable, when we get vulnerable, and when we're humble in admitting the areas that, I don't know, like I don't have a good answer, but I'm willing to push through anyway, I think that level of courage is what people are seeking in a leader. And I think that opens up this world of possibility because, you're like, wow, if you don't know, and I don't know, then we both get to play together and actually get creative. And I think the best solutions actually come out of that space of someone not being kind of this like dictator that's just driving the conversation. So, and I think in this, particular subject, for your listeners who can't see me, I'm a Black female, right? I think that it's very easy as a Black person to step into this with, I have a lot of equity in this conversation because I've lived it for all these years. And so there is some level of expertise that comes from my lived reality, but other people carry that same level of expertise just in a different way. They're bringing something else to the table. And so I don't want to be the person that someone's looking to for all of the answers. I think that's unhelpful because there's limits. I have my own talents and gifts that I can bring to this conversation, but I can't control all of it. So I do think it was interesting to see the way that disarmed the women on that call. And I'm excited to actually bring that same level of kind of transparency to other conversations, because I think it's a great starting point for everybody just to kind of throw up their hands and say, here's the little that we do know, here's what we don't know, here's what I can bring, what can you bring? And let's actually collaborate here and hopefully come to a constructive solution.
I think that's one of the most important things right now. And your approach in doing so and I know that it's something that you've said, you feel strongly about, is that we want to be careful that we don't play into this cancel culture type of vibe where you can be accountable without canceling out someone else. And that's where, you kind of sometimes open up Instagram and it's like, okay, what am I going to see this time? Right. And it's like, oh. And so have you had those situations? I guess I'll ask you both the last week or so, where if you could lend any advice to people before you start hopping into Instagram and talking and or not, because you see both. It's like we've got both sides of the spectrum. And for people that are listening and they want to speak up, but they honestly don't think they can do it right, so they don't at all, that's also not helpful. So what would you say to people, especially as it relates to social? I'd love to hear from both of you.
I'll say, so part of my training also is as a marriage and family therapist. And so I almost approach it the same way I do couples therapy, where we have to identify what's the goal of that interaction or that exchange. Are we trying to be right? Or are we seeking restoration and reconciliation? And I think if restoration is the goal, then me coming down on you with criticism or badgering you only pushes you into a place of being defensive, and it doesn't lead us at all to our goal. What's more helpful is actually to move in from a posture of like, this is how what you did, like how that affected me. Here's what my experience was of that thing. let me actually put you in my shoes where you can feel what I'm feeling about it. Shout out to the Gottmans with their conflict blueprint, right? Because that's really what they do, is to go like, how can you fully feel what the other person is feeling? And once you're in that place of true empathy, then we can actually start to collaborate on a solution. So I've seen this a lot this week with, I mean, and always, right? It's like the internet trolls and stuff, but we've all become internet trolls. Even I think, to be, very honest, I posted something where it's like, things hit you at such a visceral level, and someone would say something and I just want to like jump on that comment and shut it down. And I had to either stop myself, or I've deleted something that I posted, because I was like, man, that's just not helpful to this conversation at all. I think my first question with this person needs to be, what is the action that's going to lead us to a solution? What's going to lead to restoration? And usually coming down on them or canceling them, I don't understand where that even comes from. We can't cancel a person or cancel a life. That's terrible. So I think it's moving away from this place where we're trying to cut off from people and actually moving toward them with love, with understanding, acceptance that this may not have been your best moment. How can we make it a better moment for you?
Yeah. I was thinking, I always hear that, like, sometimes you don't need to be right, because I 100% agree that I use it in my, with my kids and with my husband. Absolutely. But I also got to say, I've been in this fight for so long in different social justice movements, political movements, racial justice movements for a long time. And I do want to win. There's something I want to win, and I want to win freedom and dignity for all people, which means for me, I believe in a world where Black lives matter. We all do. We have to be able to say that, like, that's why I'm doing this. That's what I'm here for. That's when we get back to the basics. It's that Black lives matter in these conversations. But this strategy of, you suck, you're wrong, you said something stupid, and now come join me, that's a terrible strategy. It doesn't work. It's never worked. You can ask anyone that went to college with me as a freshman in the cafeteria when I shamed them for eating meat. They did not become vegetarians. Like, we've all tried this strategy. Trying it online, like, that seems like the worst place to try to tell someone they're wrong and they're stupid and then they should join us. It just doesn't work. We saw it in the election, saying, if you vote for this person, you must be stupid. Vote for my person. Who's going to want to do that? It doesn't work. You have to meet people where they're at. Hear what's underneath it. Hear the issues. This idea, it really crystallized for me in the last election, actually, because I kept hearing things like, oh, if folks would just listen to NPR, if they knew more, if they were just more educated, then they would vote the way I vote. That sounds like colonialism. It sounds the same type of idea that we've been fighting against forever, and yet we do it in our own movements. I heard the thing like, why do people vote against their own self-interests? You hear that. That's a judgment. That is a judgment that like reeks of that kind of I know better, that patronizing kind of colonial mentality that I've been fighting against. And I saw it in myself because I've been known to do it. And I realized that's not helpful. And so when I can recognize it in myself and try not to use that strategy, it helps. I can hear myself doing it, and I have to flip it, because I also know people that vote against in their own self-interest is me. I make plenty of money and I vote to tax myself all the time. I vote Democrat. I say raise my taxes. That's against my own self-interest. But my value is that I believe I should be, the reason I do that is my tax money should go to the common good. So folks that vote different way, there's a reason behind it. People do it for all sorts of reasons. So find the reason. It's a much better strategy than calling someone stupid. But just to go back to what you were saying, Chanel, it's the moment to call people up, not call people out. And right now, everyone is yearning for that. They want to be seen and know that right now they're trying to be their higher, better, best selves. And every single person is trying that. And for those of us that have a long analysis or a long history in the movement, this is the moment to call them up. Anything I might say that sounds like a cancel, I just don't say. They don't need my voice on that. Leave it alone. I definitely want to. I tried, 2 or 3 years ago, I've refused to do it, and it makes me feel a lot better. Just know that that's not mine to respond to. If I can call someone up and show that they're doing a great job, I will. And after this morning in this conversation, I thought the final thing that I wanted to give people is this idea of beginner's mind. We were all beginners at some point, and this is for some people the beginning. The first time they're going to try to use their platform in this way. And I remember the first time I tried to identify as a feminist, or like when I wanted to talk to people about vegetarian, these are hard things. You have to practice. You have to do them over and over and over again. And we have to allow that space. And that's what I tell people, allow them a chance to be a beginner. I didn't have this thing, when I was a high school activist, I couldn't say it like this. So allowing everyone to live that is important. Okay.
Oh, the beginner's mind, it really connects, because even like when you said, you remember the first time you were really practicing and wanted to step up as a feminist or this or that, or exercising your voice in different ways. And there are a lot of rookies out there right now, and I'm one of them. And we're going to make mistakes, and you're seeing it left and right. Like it's total Bambi legs, but you just want so hard to do the right thing at the same time. Right. And so thank you for bringing up the beginner's mind, because I do think it's back to the basics with some of this stuff. And it's nobody's job per se to educate another person, but it is our own jobs to seek out the information and learn to correct or to adjust what we maybe didn't know or were falsely believing. And I think privilege is something that I think it's been the last couple of years where I really start to understand what people mean. And I know I shared this earlier, but growing up in a single wide trailer home with not a lot, I didn't fully understand what white privilege meant until it was some of the examples, and you know it, but do you really get it? Like, do you really get it? Rather than just saying, okay, I get it. Like, can you fully understand is another thing. So that beginner's mind is helpful, because you've been at this for many, many years, Nisha, and it's probably easy for you to talk way up into the complexity of this, but actually there's a lot of people that's way above their head right now, right? So thank you for being willing to go there. Let's talk about one of the elements under that umbrella, and that is Black Lives Matter. So how many people are confused of saying, no, all lives matter? And yes, of course they do. And how you've been able to explain it, Nisha, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Chanel, is all lives actually don't matter until Black Lives Matter too. And your metaphor for this is an analogy or a metaphor? I always get those two mixed up. Can you share kind of a really simple way to explain this? It's so helpful.
Sure. This is very simple. And I'm open to somebody, please, if this sounds terrible and horrible, call me out on it. That's what I'm here for. But one of the ones that has worked with me before, this analogy, and that's me practicing saying, I can make a mistake. This might be a mistake. Go for it. But here's what worked for me once is I agree that unless you can say Black Lives Matter, you can't actually believe that all lives matter. So say it, and say it loud, and say it like you mean it. I think it's important. But I was giving the analogy to somebody else that let's say you're on your block and you're watching a house burn down, and the firemen show up and they're like, what's going on? And you're like, that house is on fire. You need to spray your hose and get this house to not be on fire because this house matters. I know the people in this house matters. And they turn around and say, well, all houses matter. So this house over here, I'm going to spray a hose on that. Yes, of course, all houses matter, but that house is not on fire. This one is. And I use that like right now, that's what's both literally and figuratively, Black communities, our cities, we are on fire. Like this is urgent. It has been urgent since the beginning of this country. It is urgent now. And there is a moment when we can change it. And so this moment, I have never seen more people come and see this now as we are right now. And I've been doing it for a long time. Like I think we've said now 100 times, point the hose to where it's burning.
Is there anything you would add to that, Chanel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so beautifully stated. I love that metaphor or analogy. We haven't yet decided, but I love it. I think it's such a helpful framework to think through what this concept is like. I also just encourage people that are wrestling with that phrase and that feel uncomfortable when they hear it to slow down and ask yourself, just non-judgmentally, honestly, just to stop and say, what about this makes me feel so uncomfortable? What am I afraid of? What am I afraid might be embedded in that statement? And then to address that, right? Like move away. I do think it's important that we say the statement. So those of us that are ready and that are comfortable to say Black Lives Matter, obviously, like do it and be vocal about it. But those that aren't ready or that have a visceral reaction to it, explore it. Get curious about yourself. I mean, that's so much of what I say in my work. Get curious. What about that makes you feel so uncomfortable? Why is there a threat there that you're perceiving? And where do you think that idea comes from? And do you think it's true? Actually, like interrogate your own thoughts. Don't let someone else interrogate your thoughts. You be the primary interrogator of your own beliefs, right? That's empowering. So go back and think through what comes up for me in these moments.
That's good. I love that. Interrogate your own thoughts. And going inside, so much of this conversation is on the outside, and it's happening in a place where we all feel we're being watched and judged and seen. And so get clear first on the inside. And do you believe Black Lives Matter? Ask yourself. I think that's something where I've had some frustrations lately with social, because it's like sometimes I just think, put your phone down and go have a conversation with someone. I know for me that's been much more impactful than consuming things online right now. It's just it's much more, it's going to make a much longer, impact on my behavior, my choices, what happens in 3 months, 3 years from now versus posting a black square on Instagram and then feeling like you checked a box or whatever. It's really made me pause, and I hope we don't get caught up and swept away by a flash in the pan on social, especially. Nisha, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you know and what you've experienced with making adversaries into unlikely allies. And I just love that phrase, because that's exactly what you do, and that's how you position it for a reason, because not everybody even knows the first step and how that can happen. Let's just say we're entering a conversation with a friend or family member and we know they feel differently. What are some of your steps and tips on how to elevate the bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I said a little bit that I think that we are all born we know how to find common ground. We were all raised in neighborhoods that, I know, Chanel, you said earlier that you're in Atlanta in the suburbs. I was raised in the suburbs of Atlanta, and Atlanta is very much a black and white city. And you could just by address be somewhere where you won't see anyone else like you. And as a young Indian immigrant too, and I was raised by my dad. So in the 80s, having only a dad from India in the South, I was very odd. I had to figure out how to navigate a million different situations. The question, what are you, was something that came up all the time. And I was like, what do you mean, what am I? I still get it. People still ask those kind of questions. They want to know, my ethnic origin. No one's learned how to say that. So they ask things like, what are you? That's also part of the practice that we have to have. But I believe we were born finding common ground. So I had to grow up in a black and white South. I had to be a perfect Indian daughter who knew how to get great grades and make tea and be beautiful. But I also was like this rebellious punk rocker. I was, the super feminist animal rights activist. I also wanted to be different, and I wanted to but I had to be able to navigate all those worlds. I didn't fit in anywhere. So I was like, I'm not going to fit in anywhere, and I'm going to fit in everywhere. I was one of those kids that had every group of friends. To do that, you have to know how to find common ground. I think we can all find those stories in ourselves. I think I was kind of born to find it. So I think you can look at different places in your life first to know that you have this ability. We all have been born with it. In the South especially, you have to learn how to sit at the table with somebody who disagrees with everything you believe in and still be polite and say, pass the sweet tea and have a great night. We do that. So I don't think it's impossible. And in fact, this country, this democracy was built on the idea that you should have majority, minority opinions, that the states' rights and I don't have to go into how, the different houses are made up in Congress, but there's this idea that there's this great coming together. And if you put all the ideas in one place, you're going to get a good outcome. not a moderate, middle, mushy kind of outcome, but by people bringing their values from whatever side they sit on, you can actually get to a higher purpose. So I think 1, realize you have it in yourself. 2, everywhere you look, people are doing this. And in fact, that's what this country was built on. So this is our natural way of being. This divide and conquer is a tool that has been used throughout history. We cannot use it ourselves. I refuse to use that kind of tool that has been used against us for so long. That's part of what cancel culture is. It's that same divide and conquer feeling. Don't use it. We're all here. So I'd say step 1, it's natural. We should do it. I learned the hard lesson when we decided we were going to pass bipartisan criminal justice reform. So it's a very real example. I started working with Van, like I said, it was about 7 or so years ago, and he told me we were going to pass criminal justice reform in a bipartisan way. I had been a criminal justice activist, advocate on the streets, getting arrested for these causes for a long time. I didn't think it was possible, but he pointed me to 3 main parts of the Republican Party who agreed with us. He said the economic conservatives think it's a waste of money. They're using all the taxpayer dollars and they're getting terrible results. The religious right believe in second chances and redemption. In prisons, and the way prisons and criminal justice system looks doesn't show any of that. And then the libertarians think that there's a crazy police state with way too much power, locking too many people up, and they can't get their marijuana. Just to be, just to tell you what was there in front of us. So looking at those parts of the Republican Party, they want criminal justice reform as well. Not at all for the same reasons as me, but they want it, and that's where you can find your allies. I have this strong sense of justice that I think it is a broken system that has been used to target Black and brown communities for as long as it's been in existence. That's not how they feel. They just think, it's bloat and I hate the government and whatever. There's room to work together though, because there's a common purpose. And I think wherever there's a common pain, you can find common purpose. And I see that happening a lot now. We passed the largest criminal justice reform in generations. About 7,000 people got out when we passed it. So it took about 4 years. It was led by people who were my adversaries. And I have a lot of stories about who I worked with to get this done, but we got it done. Trump had to sign it. We started this work under the Obama administration. It took a long time to get it done. You still need the president's signature at the end of the day. So we had to orchestrate that as well. How do we get that? I had to bring in some quite unlikely allies. Kim Kardashian came in and had a conversation. That moved the conversation a lot. Of course, all of the Black activists for the last 100 years that have been fighting for this did the hard work of bringing this issue and bringing it out and pointing it out. But you got to get everybody involved to get it across the finish line. So I think everybody has a place. Absolutely everyone has a place to get the stuff done. And right now, when I think about who are the adversaries in the fight against police brutality, the obvious answer is police unions. And you have them on our side now. I never thought that was likely. So if that can happen in this country, then your neighbor who might be voting for somebody you're not going to vote for, very easy to have that conversation. You just have to be brave enough to do it. And in this kind of pandemic environment, it's hard to have these conversations. I'm not running into people. I'm not going to clubs. We're not talking, whatever. So it's a little bit harder, but not too hard. Find that safe person in your phone you haven't talked to in a while. Be like, hey, I was thinking about you and what's going on. I'd love to have this conversation because I need to practice and I don't know what I want to say. Maybe you want to do that too. Reach out because they're bored. If they're not out marching, they might be bored sitting at home, watching the same shows on Netflix. Have that conversation and just start. I know that we've done harder things in our history. We can do this.
I love that. So know that you have it in you, because we all do, right? And finding that common ground, even if you have to search for it, starting there, I think there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something you agree on. And so finding those areas, even if it's not for the same reasons, but it is a common place to start. I love that. Where else would you like to go with this conversation? What do you feel like isn't being said? Or what have you been wanting to say? What do you feel like hasn't been understood or misunderstood?
I just want to add actually one thing to what Nisha was just saying, which I think was just so beautiful the way that you outlined that. Another piece is about conceptualizing what thriving looks like for your adversary. right? And inviting them into that. I mean, it's not just something that you're putting on them. Part of what you were speaking about, that common pain and that common purpose and common solution that's possible there, is taking time to get to know people and get to know what the good life looks like for them, and that being a space for common ground. That can be up for debate a little bit, right? But I think it changes the conversation. And even, I think when I did that video the other day, part of the effort was to actually shift the conversation into what does thriving look like? What does it mean for someone to be fully optimized? What does it look like to be using your skills, your talents to the highest extent? And then putting out cultural goods that are for other people's thriving. I think we sometimes have this idea that for me to win, that means you have to lose in some way. And that's not the case. It's actually we all can live a really good life. We're all entitled to a very good life. And so pausing on that, and it may, I think a space of potential conflict in that is that sometimes your version or what you think is the good life for you may be a little bit wrong, right? It may not actually be fulfilling for you. And so that's a space that we have to dig into and kind of unpack a bit. But I think that we can be invested in our adversaries too. I want people that are on the other side of this movement right now in this time, as much as I am fighting for, because of what this moment is about, fighting for Black people to have an equal place in society and to be honored and viewed as human beings and fully cared for. I don't want that to be at the expense of someone else's thriving. So I'm trying to achieve both of those things. And I think moving into that space moving into these conversations where you're acknowledging that you want the best, you're actually seeking the best for the other person, is really helpful and disarming, because then they don't have to move into that defensive position. It's oh, you're actually for me too? Okay. So now we can have a more helpful conversation here.
It's very, very important. One of the things that I keep hearing, I don't know where I heard it first, but it's definitely not mine, but more than one thing can be true at the same time. And really, really realizing some of these conversations are complex. And in some ways, they're very simple. And they're both. And so I think that's a good thing to remember too. It's helped me think things through a little more thoroughly at times. But as it relates to voting, and as it relates to, exercising our voices as well as voting with our dollars, what do you think? I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are hurting right now because of COVID, and individuals that don't have jobs. There's that angle, but there's also the election coming up. Let's talk a little bit about using our voices and our dollars as a way to vote and make change. What are the first couple of ways that you can see? Nisha, I'll start with you. You see all this defunding police and reform, and I think this is where some people get the education level isn't there. I know that I'm okay, I know there's a big move to be made on the local level. I don't know exactly what it is. So yeah, what do you have to say about using our voices as currency as well?
Absolutely. I think the first thing, and this can't be said enough, is support Black-owned businesses. Support them with your dollars, whatever you're shopping for, during, with. Support them in the rebuilding phase. I think they are hit first and worst by they were hit first and worst by the pandemic. You heard the stories of the loans that the government were giving, how hard it was for Black-owned businesses to get loans. That's current modern day redlining, which I can talk about in a different podcast if you want to know about it. Support Black businesses with your dollars. Absolutely. I want to say that up front. I also want to talk about defund the police, because I think it is an important thing. Sometimes we choose words that immediately have this instant feeling. It's what does that mean? Do I really believe that? Look beyond the headline. And I'd actually say that a lot of folks might believe this. We hear this a lot with prisons when they hear well, what would we do without prisons? I'm not saying get rid of them right now. I'm saying I want to get rid of the root cause, all of the root causes that lead people into that. Racism is not just about police brutality. Police brutality is racist. We have to reform the police system. I'd say that's number one. Policing, federal, local, reforms on what's possible, on what is allowed and acceptable in policing has to happen. But that's not where reform can end. Let's start there. That's the conversation. Let's get that done. racism has a bunch of other ugly heads that we can also address in the future. So let's get this done while we can. I think there's enough impetus to have policing reform. That has never been true in my lifetime. We have it now, let's do it. And then let's see the next places where we can deal with racism in terms of laws and policy. I always think about policy. Defund the police is saying that what's causing current law enforcement to react this way, we shouldn't give more money to keep causing the same problems. What has to be true in order for law enforcement to be less needed? More mental health services. If someone is having a mental health breakdown in the street and may be dangerous, people call the police. And we give the police more money to do that. What if instead we gave more money to all of the mental health, local mental health clinics, experts, to build a system that can respond to that in a more humane way? We do not need more mentally ill people in prison, period. That is not where they belong. It doesn't lead to reform. It doesn't lead to health of our communities. It doesn't make any communities any safer. That's not how we should react to it. So defund the police is this idea, can we put more money into education instead of law enforcement? We spend like somewhere between $11,000 to $20,000 a year on each of our students in the public school system. We spend $30,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 a year here in California to keep somebody inside prison. That is a messed up set of priorities, period. The entire pipeline, and law enforcement is a huge piece of this when we talk about school to prison pipeline, is funded in the wrong way. It is misguided use of our taxpayer dollars. So a whole community response, not just to police brutality, but to all the racism that leads to this system, all of the injustice that leads to this ugliness we're all seeing, there's a different way to fund that. There's a different response that we're waking up to right now. We have a lot of people on our side, and these solutions are common sense. So if someone is like, let's not use any money for mental health for police officers, but instead have mental health officers deal with issues in this way, that would be common ground, easily common ground solution. So I'm looking for that in terms of the reforms we want for police and where we'd rather spend our money so that we can have an entire whole community response to the racism that's everywhere.
I just took notes. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about positive sentiment toward Black Lives Matter among white male Republicans. So that is up 17%. Positive. That's great. Nisha, can you talk a little bit about how that shift, what it means, but also what you've seen over the years and how significant it may or may not be?
Daily Kos, KOS, has been doing a study for 3 years on Black Lives Matter and the sentiment amongst it. And they break it down by race and party and all sorts of things. And you saw a study at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. You could see some of the things shift in their reaction to it. So that's spelled KOS. I didn't get really into the study. It came out this morning. But we all know when Black Lives Matter, the hashtag was first born, you had so much of this all lives mattered nonsense. I'm hearing a lot less of it anecdotally. I don't hear that kind of stuff anymore. I even hear from people who weren't in this fight are now in this fight again. There are new young people getting active for the first time. That's huge. And to bring people, like I said, the strategy, you suck, come join us, is a bad strategy. Instead, the strategy is you're hearing this for the first time, you kind of see there's something wrong, come join us. When you measured sentiment at the height of the MLK era, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but people did not agree with most of his protest tactics. People did not agree with what was going on in the civil rights movement at that moment. But we look back on it now and everyone's like, why can't you be more like that? It was peaceful protest. Absolutely. There was a ton of nonviolence training that went into every single action that was done that we think of. Lunch counter sit-ins, bus boycotts. Those were well-trained people who were taught not to retaliate. So there is a large movement of like, let's try to be as peaceful as possible. We can't do that. However, people didn't like that either. People did not like Kaepernick kneeling, period. You had stadiums filled of folks booing. So when it was peaceful, it wasn't acceptable. When it is loud, it's not acceptable. There are no ways that are going to be acceptable to protest until the stuff changes. And in retrospect, everyone's going to say, oh, I was out on the street. I was part of this because that's the right side of history. I can't remember your question, but when sentiment changes, it shifts the window of what's possible. There's this old concept of the Overton window and what policy could you push through? If you can change sentiment, you can change policy. And I just think the fact that we can talk about policing reforms, that's a huge shift. When you have this measurement, so I ask everyone to look up for, we've heard a lot of tales about the last election, it being mostly white women. They also are changing, white women Republicans who identify as Republicans, 17% change also in positive feelings towards Black Lives Matter. That's hopeful. That's beautiful. That's hopeful. And I'm determined to not let this moment and this sentiment not be captured to make this world a better place. That's all I've ever wanted. And there's a moment in which more people are with us than have ever been before. It's going to be hard, but we've dreamed our way out of really dark moments in the past. I think we can do it again.
And then that's where longevity and sustainability comes into play too. And in terms of, the dark moments, sometimes they're darker than others. And if they start to lift a bit, what happens to behavior? So let's talk about that for a minute. Chanel, what are your thoughts on, and just feelings on, are you worried that this is a flash in the pan? It's not a flash in the pan per se, but the amount of intensity around it is going to wear off. And what do you think we can do to continue to hold ourselves accountable and take action?
Yeah, it's definitely a fear for me right now. I think whenever there's a level of high excitement, whenever there's change, we tend to do a pendulum swing. I think that's largely why we are where we are right now. We had massive change and growth with President Barack Obama and changing the conversation and what we believed was possible for a leader, what he could look like, or she maybe one day, right? We had swung into this new space, and then we said, no, we're really not comfortable with that. And as a nation, we did a pendulum swing in the other direction. So I am nervous that there's a lot of energy around this, which is exciting. There is a great opportunity. I love what you said, Nisha, about the sentiment and policy being able to kind of be developed around that when there's some sentiment that's changed as well. So I think there's a great opportunity to kind of push a lot of things through. I'm nervous about that as well, because I think the things that could potentially be pushed through in this moment may not be well developed or thought out. But I think that a lot of what is happening, particularly online, and I think it's whatever you've had to make a political statement or take a stand in some way, there's always the idea that there will be eyes on you. But I think with social media, it's like intensified that to a whole other level. And so I think we're pushing people to make statements and to step out in a way that their life may not fully be following with, right? So it's like they're leading with their lips, but not their legs. And I really would love for people to actually move their life in line with their espoused beliefs, right? So I think what will change that, and kind of what I'm inviting people to do, is really change your social circle. Change the people that you know, change your life rhythms, get uncomfortable, get in proximity to people who are different than you, because that's the only way that these conversations will continue to come up again and again and again. It is not possible. My husband is a doctor. He's a psychiatrist. We have this awesome thing on our car. We have these license plates that are doctor's plates. So it's great. I feel like I'm like a celebrity rolling through. I don't need a Secret Service. I've got the doctor's plates, especially during COVID. They roll out the red carpet for me. But I have this fear with him riding around all the time in that car, because I don't know if the doctor's plates are protective or more dangerous for him. It's like, is the assumption that you've stolen that car because you can't possibly be a doctor? Or is it, okay, doc, we'll let you pass? So I bring up this fear a lot, because when he goes out and he does things on his own, it causes anxiety in my own life. And my friends, the people who are in my real life, are very aware of that. Because they do life with me, because we talk and we spend time together, I naturally share with them the things that are of concern for me. And so particularly my white friends are like, so wait, every time your husband gets in the car to go to the grocery store with doctor's plates in Atlanta, you're afraid for his life? What's that like? And that comes up because that anxiety and that stress doesn't end for me. And so I don't stop talking about it. And so they have to encounter that idea again and again and again. And I think that that's one way that we can get long-term sustainable change is when we're placed in relationship with people that are different, so that we have to confront their lives again and again and again. And we have to decide, am I going to advocate for you or am I not? Was that a moment? Because for you, it wasn't a moment. I can't opt out of the conversation. So I think we should do that in our real life. Don't even focus on doing it online. It's great if you can do that online, but I'm talking about in your real life, do it first. Try to develop those real relationships, push to the farthest edge, the margins of the diversity of your circle. And then use those people to actually further expand into more diversity within your circle, right? And then take it online. Start to pay attention to who you follow. What magazines do you subscribe to? What shows are you watching? Look at your Netflix history, right? What am I ingesting and internalizing? And use that to start guiding you into new spaces.
Yeah, underline that. I think it is so important, and people think it's like weak and not a big deal. It is a very big deal. That proximity, there was a sentiment measurement around gay marriage, which is now the law of the land. But I didn't think that was possible when I was younger. And in interviews, there was enough question. I said, why did your mind change? And they said, well, I met someone who was gay. And as they asked, and this question, there was enough people that said this, who did you meet? And they said it was the cast of Glee in stories like that it was watching a TV show that actually meant that they had that sympathy. I can't stress it enough. My feed, I do look at Fox News. I look at it anytime I think the world's changing. I make sure I'm following those accounts so I see how other people are looking at this. You have to know what else is going on in the world. So I just want to underscore that, Chanel. I think it is so important, and it's easy for everyone to do right now. That's one that you can just do.
I loved what you said, Chanel, about leading with your legs, not your lips or your thumbs on social media, right? I woke up this past Sunday morning and I just said, okay, what is the most brave thing I could do today that would make an impact? Like just from me personally using my unique gifts. And it had nothing to do with social media. It had to do with reaching out to someone and having a conversation. And I think if for everyone listening, I just encourage you to put the phone down for a second and think about what Chanel just said and what Nisha just said about proximity and conversation. And humanity, it just is so much stronger when that phone is involved sometimes. And we, leading with your legs, not your lips and your thumbs. Oh, I love it. Okay, so anything else? Any wrap-up, closing statements, thoughts, things that you're like, oh, I wanted to say this?
I actually want to underscore what you just said. I thought, man, what a renegade question, right? So Amy Jo that would say that, like, you woke up and you asked yourself the question, what's the bravest thing that I can do today? Like that, let's end there, right? Everyone ask yourself that question. What is the bravest thing that I can do? I think the temptation of this moment is to play small. The temptation is to stay safe, to stay comfortable. And we want to be people of substance. Like I want to grow to be a woman of consequence, and that comes with bravery and courage. And I think we need to understand that this work is hard. It is challenging. It will cost us something, but we are more than able to handle the challenge of the moment. And let's be brave. Like, what is the bravest thing I can do today?
And that's exactly where you both started with your Why Not Now stories, with getting uncomfortable. So it comes full circle. I want to thank you so much for not only doing this on the fly. I mean, we literally just talked about, hey, do you want to hop in and have this conversation? But being willing and schedule-wise, sharing your time, your wisdom, your passion, your expertise, your humanity. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And this isn't the end of the conversation by any means.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?